when it's cold that makes me feel good. I was smoking a cigarette on the house's back deck, surveying the yard one more time before going back inside. I was almost finished when I heard it. A scream. It wasn't the kind of distant animal cry you hear sometimes out in the country. No, this was different. It was sharp, high-pitched, and unmistakably human. It sounded like it could have been a child, maybe a young boy. The sound echoed from the cornfield just beyond the house. Without thinking, I ran inside, grabbed my hunting rifle, and went back out. I'm not sure what came over me, but there was no way I was going to ignore a child that was potentially in danger. As I was running toward the cornfield, the scream came again, louder this time. I stopped in my tracks, scanning the dark, but I couldn't see anyone. I called out to the kid, asking him to scream again so I could find him. Silence. Adrenaline was surging through me at that point. I jumped the fence, picked a random row of corn, and ran alongside it, using my phone's shitty flashlight to see. I kept yelling out, but that kid never yelled back. Eventually, I realized I was in over my head. I called the police and explained to them what I had heard before returning to my house, waiting for them to arrive. When the officers arrived, I insisted on helping them search the field. They let me help, which I was grateful for. We searched for at least half an hour, calling out to that kid the whole time. He never yelled back, though. There was nothing out there, no footprints, no signs of movement, not a single trace that anyone had been in that field. Eventually, we gave up. The officers told me to call again if I heard anything and left. I was frustrated, but what could I do? Part of me wondered if the whole thing had been a prank, which sort of made sense. I'm sure the kids out there struggled to occupy the hours. It just made me sick to think that someone would prank another person like that. As much as I tried to convince myself that it had all been a prank, I couldn't relax after that. Little did I know that the situation was about to go from a 1 to a 10. As I was upstairs getting ready for bed, something from outside the window caught my eye. It was the last thing anyone would ever want to see outside a bedroom window, a faint orange glow. I rushed to the window, and I felt my stomach drop. Off in the distance, there were small flames rising from the cornfield, flickering wildly in the dark. I remember yelling "holy fuck" over and over. I knew I had to do something. The fire wasn't huge, but I knew it would spread fast with how windy it was out there. I sprinted down the stairs while calling 911, practically screaming into the phone. I grabbed the hose from the side of my house, turned it on, jumped the fence, and sprinted into the field. I prayed that it would be long enough to reach the fire. I was soaked by the time I reached the fire, but I didn't care. I knew the fire department would take forever to get there. I was the only hope. I sprayed the flames as best I could, doing everything I could to contain it. I was unbelievably lucky that it hadn't spread more quickly. I was able to put it out completely in just a few minutes. I leaned down to catch my breath, wondering why in the world this shit was happening to me. As I stood there, drenched in sweat and water, I caught movement from the corner of my eye. I turned and nearly died right on the spot. There was someone at the upstairs window of my house. They were in my bedroom. Without thinking, I dropped the hose that was still spraying water and sprinted toward the house. I threw open the door and burst into the kitchen, only to freeze in place. The entire room was trashed. My fridge and cabinets were all open, and a bunch of my dishes had been smashed on the floor. It was fucking crazy, and I didn't know what to think. I barely had time to process the chaos when I heard the front door slam. I spun around and ran to the front door, but by the time I got there, whoever had been inside was gone. I rushed outside again, but they were nowhere in sight. I didn't have the energy to chase them. I actually thought I was going to pass out from how chaotic the sequence of events had been. A few minutes later, the police and firefighters finally showed up. I told them what had happened, and they took things much more seriously this time around. Attempted arson is a serious felony, and they treated it like such. A bunch more police officers and even some police dogs were brought out to conduct a more thorough search, but once again, they didn't find anything. Clearly, they had enough time to escape on foot. For a few weeks, I couldn't sleep. Every creak, every rustle in the night set me on edge. I slept with my hunting rifle on the floor next to me every night until I was able to move out. I kept thinking about what had happened. It didn't make any sense, but what gets me the most is that first scream. It makes me sick to think that there might have actually been a child in danger, not even 100 yards from me.